awesome topic of Caribbean women leading the way, particularly during these uncertain and difficult times in the midst of the pandemic, where leadership is of the utmost importance. A report entitled Women in Political Leadership in the Caribbean by the United Nations stated that, quote, women's political participation is critical to fulfilling the potential of democracy. Importantly, it also stated that women make essential contributions to achieving and maintaining peaceful and secure communities, the full realization of human rights, the eradication of disease, hunger, and poverty, and the promotion of sustainable development. Now, all of this, in my opinion, sounds like the things that we need at this very moment in time. I am pleased to be joined by my esteemed colleague and co-host, Mr. Hugh Riley, partner at the Portfolio Marketing Group and former Secretary General of the Caribbean Tourism Organization, who I will now ask to do the honors of introducing our very distinguished panel. Hugh, good afternoon to you.
Frederick, thank you. Thank you very much. Well, our distinguished panelists have extensive bios and they're all online, so we will do just abbreviated introductions. Rhoda Reddock is Professor Emerita of Gender, Social Change and Development at the St. Augustine campus of the University of the West Indies. She has served as Deputy Principal and the first head of the Institute for Gender and Development Studies. Active in the national and Caribbean women's movement and other social causes, she is the recipient of numerous national, regional, and international awards, including the Triennial CARICOM Award for Women 2002 and an honorary doctorate from the University of the Western Cape, South Africa. She has written extensively on some of the issues that we will be covering on today's program. Professor Reddock is an elected expert of the United Nations Committee for the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. Professor Rhoda Reddock, welcome to the Road Ahead.
Thank you very much.
Elizabeth Thompson is Ambassador and Permanent Representative of Barbados to the United Nations. Since her appointment in 2018, Ambassador Thompson has been co-facilitator of the UN's Science, Technology and Innovation Forum and is the current chair of the Credentials Committee. For 2 years, she served as Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations with specific responsibility as one of 2 executive coordinators of the Rio +20 Conference on Sustainable Development. She is an attorney at law. She was an elected member of Parliament and served as a Minister of Government in Barbados from 1994 to 2008. Ambassador Liz Thompson, welcome to the Road Ahead.
Thank you so much.
Penelope Beckles is a Trinidad and Tobago diplomat, politician, and attorney at law. Currently, she serves as the permanent representative of Trinidad and Tobago to the United Nations. She has an expansive political career, having first entered the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago in 1995 as an opposition senator, and she has held various ministerial portfolios, including Minister of Public Utilities and the Environment, Minister of Culture and Tourism, and Minister of Social Development. In 2007, she became the first female in the history of the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago to be elected as Deputy Speaker of the House of Representatives. She's passionate about youth development, gender equality, and justice, and is a strong advocate for the increased participation of women in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Ambassador Penny Beckles, welcome to the Road Ahead. Well, Frederick, I think it's fair to say that we have a panel of high achievers here, of whom our region can be extremely proud. So let's get started.
Indeed, indeed. Well, welcome once again. It's our pleasure here at Tempo to have you here on the Road Ahead, and we're looking forward to a very exciting panel discussion. Let me first say to our panelists that as we discuss this amazing topic, you know, certain questions, of course, will be directed to particular panelists, but everyone should feel we're among friends and family. Everyone should feel free to jump in at any time, okay? All right, so that's my one ground rule, the only ground rule. So let's start, as I am known to say at the beginning, which is always a good place to start. Let's start with the question of why Caribbean women in leadership, right? Why? I mentioned some of the reasons in my introduction, and but I want to know what your thoughts are, each one of the panelists, on the question of why it is important that women lead. Let's see, who shall I begin with? Let's begin with Ambassador Beckles. Oh, did we lose her? We might have. All right. Well, let's start with Ambassador Thompson as we regain Ambassador Beckles. Ambassador Thompson.
Thank you so much. You know, it's important for women to lead because we are more than half of the population, or we are about half of the population. We cannot have people making decisions for us when we don't have a seat at the table. It is important to have female leadership because if you look at how COVID has been managed, for instance, the countries which have done the best have all been female led, whether it's Germany or Australia or New Zealand or New
South Korea.
Zealand or um, Germany, Barbados, and I could go on to give all of the countries that have been recognized as having performed exceptionally well. But equally, you know, there is absolutely no enterprise or endeavor in which we would write off half or just about half of our resources and think that we are doing extremely well, that we are being highly successful, that we are managing those resources well. And yet that is what we do with our human capital. We do not properly utilize or respond to half of our population. And we can't be truly successful. We cannot have the greatest capacity and growth and reflection of our human potential unless we take the skills and talents of all our people and value the fact that women do bring something special and unique to the table. And that cannot only exist at the bottom levels of society. It has to infuse every aspect of life and society, and it certainly has to be part of the leadership of our societies and economies.
I take your points, Ambassador. In fact, you make many points that we're going to explore, including the successes of those countries that have been led by women with regards to containment of the current pandemic and why that's so. So we're going to jump into that in a second, but let's go to Professor Reddock on the question of, again, of why women should be in leadership positions.
Thank
Professor,
you
yes.
very much. Yes, thank you very much. I support everything that my colleague just said, but I think basically it's a human right. In other words, the right to aspire to and to attain leadership is something that every human being should have the opportunity to. So I think that's the first thing. But I also believe, and I agree with my colleague again, that because of women's specific experiences, you know, their life cycle, their social, political, or their, their family, and all the experiences that they bring different insights. In fact, diversity is necessary for any political project. And I think the experiences of women and the diverse experiences of women are critical in this regard. I think why it's also important is that it's very bad to have small numbers of women in leadership because of the inequalities of power relations, the historical inequalities in power relations. You need to have a critical mass of women to really provide that base to be able to make the changes and to bring those different sensibilities to impact on political and other decisions. So I think there are many reasons. And I think the basic reason is that they're human beings and they should have that right.
Well, I also agree. So human rights and diversity. We're going to touch a little bit more on those as well. Let's jump over to Ambassador Beckles. Same question. Nice to see you. Um, why
Yeah.
women in leadership?
Well, I mean, we could start with the important and basic um, issue of population. I mean, women make up half of the world. And when you think about the importance of post-COVID-19, the issue of leadership and governance, gender equality, and you talk about all the issues that are being impacted, whether it's food security, whether it's healthcare, whether it's unpaid leave. I mean, all these issues are very critical in terms of the impact that they have on women. When you talk about gender sensitive leadership and ensuring that you have the role of women in decision making process to ensure, for example, the budgetary process, the allocation, women are the ones who are most impacted, not just by COVID, by virtually everything that is done in the world. And therefore, whether it's civil society, whether it's the legislative process, you want to have the voices of women heard. I mean, in a sense, ultimately, if that is done, the likelihood is that in terms of the decisions, in terms of the solutions, you find that in many cases, women will not be left behind. And therefore, it's, for me, it's all about gender sensitive leadership and ensuring the participation of women who make up half of the world. And basically, as I think Professor Reddock said, therefore, they should really have the right to participation in this making process.
Well, certainly all compelling reasons. And you know, we let me actually jump to the results of some studies, right? And get your opinion on that, which plays into much of the answers that were given in that opening question. In the area of political leadership, for example, people in the Caribbean thankfully believe that women would have a greater focus on issues like eliminating poverty, building schools, hospitals, and clinics, and strengthening the moral and religious fabric of the nation. Now, as opposed, and this is very interesting, as opposed to male leaders, uh, were seen to be more likely to take their country, quote unquote, to war, uh, build new roads, build sporting and recreational facilities, interestingly, steal and engage in corruption, strengthen the OECS, CARICOM, and enhance status of country internationally. So those were the results of a study, which is very interesting. What agree or disagree, or what is the response to some of that in terms of what the focus of female leadership versus male leadership brings? Let's go to let's start this one with let's go to you, Ambassador Thompson.
Again, please.
Um, did
You
you hear
asked
the
what
question?
female like leadership brings?
Well, in terms of the study
Yeah.
and the difference between, at least what the study suggested, between male leadership and female leadership, especially, you know, the point about corruption.
I was saying to you that I'm not going to get into the more colorful aspects of the study. I think
Okay.
what women do bring to the table is a more empathetic, caring style of leadership. I mean, there has been a fair amount of research now that shows that companies which are more diverse, which have larger numbers of women, one, and larger numbers of women in leadership, two, tend to perform better, have a more inclusive workplace culture. And what we saw with COVID is clearly that in crisis, when you had to motivate populations, when you needed a more empathetic style of leadership, when you needed to be more inclusive, that women seem to have been better at creating the environment for populations to feel secure and for populations to flourish. And that is typically how women lead their own homes, their own households, their own families. You create the environment for the members of the household to feel safe, to realize their potential, and to flourish, and you protect your family. And it is those attributes which are so naturally female, the empathy, the caring, the allowing you to emerge, to the management of the crisis, the number of balls that you have to have up in the air. And you see women who do it all the time, even women socially whom we have thought of as low income, who have not had tremendous resources, but have been able to manage their families exceptionally well. And you hear a lot of people tell you, I grew up when we were poor and I didn't know we were poor. And it has to do with the way that the mothers, and let's understand that in the region, roughly 70% of households are female led. So that matriarchal type of leadership really did allow families to flourish and to succeed. And the female leaders have now transferred that into the society. So I think what you are seeing is very female, feminine kinds of characteristics informing women's leadership style. And it is proving to be highly successful, as all of the studies have shown that female leaders are high performers, and equally their entities, their organizations are high performing organizations.
Well, I did see that in the studies as well, and I agree that is one of the characteristics that I think male leadership does fall short of. What would you say? I'm gonna go to Professor Ruddock next, and then I want you to comment on that same point. But also, what would you say? I'm gonna add something. What would you say to those that would say, okay, well, that's fine and well, but there are circumstances where you need quote unquote strong leadership. You need a decisive position made. You need strength, which you will hear often at times. I want you to comment or put that into your answer on that question.
Thanks, Frederick. I think that there's so much in there. First of all, we have to be careful not to essentialize. In other words, I think that there are some characteristics that women develop because of historical factors, because of their responsibilities and households and families, etc. But I think if we essentialize them to women, then we suggest that men cannot also develop these kinds of capacities. So I do think that women do bring that if they have the confidence to do that, and also if they have the sensibility to do it. And we have to agree that this is not the case for all women, which is why I said that women in leadership also need to be very strong if they have to operate within a male-dominated context. In other words, they need the strength to bring these values and these approaches which may go against the grain. That's one thing. So I think that women need to be confident in some of the characteristics of femininity, which have been traditionally not seen as important. I think there was a time when it was strongly felt that for women to succeed in leadership, they had to take on the attributes of their male counterparts. And still today in society, the characteristics of humanity that are accepted as the norm are usually masculine characteristics. So I think if we are seeing a greater recognition and valuing of the so-called feminine, I think that's an important thing. But I do agree that women still need the strength, both their internal confidence, as well as the strength in numbers, to be able to have that impact on decision-making at various levels in our societies.
Understood.
So I can say a lot more, but I'll leave some for my colleagues.
Right, of course. Confidence. Well, I know this is not lacking in Ambassador Beckles, so same question.
Well, my question is always, what is strong leadership?
Okay.
Because there's always this perception that strength equates masculinity. And the issues as it relates to leadership, you know, people are focusing on war, and they are focused on the issue of taking hard decisions. And there is this perception, well, you know, that when a woman is leading, if you have to take the hard decision about going to war, you know, if you have to take a decision in terms of the budgetary process as to what would you spend on going to war, what would you spend on food? I mean, if you look at the UN and you look at the data that speaks to how much money is spent on war daily, and then you look at what is happening in poverty, the argument will be that a woman leading is more likely to want to deal with issues of poverty, food and security. And when you assign portfolios, it's always social development, gender, women affairs, culture, and the likes. Then you come to issues relating to engineering, technical issues. Those portfolios are for men. So in a sense, it's a whole question of socialization and perception. So when I talk about what is strong leadership, to me, strong leadership has to be effective leadership. Strong leadership has to be understanding of what your country needs at any particular point in time. So we socialize, and therefore we give the toys to the boys of soldiers and guns, and you give to the girls of dolls. And so then there's then the nursing professions and other things. So we begin from very early to decide to be a strong leader. It has to be in relation to war. Okay, so a woman would not deal with that. So for me, it's always effective. I mean, look at what's happening in COVID, and look at what the analysis in terms of who are the most effective leaders and who truly understand what their country needs at this point in time. It's amazing that you're not hearing about war, and nobody's saying, well, why aren't we going to war at this point in time? So, I mean, I'm very clear in my mind, and you see people are trusting more women to lead. In the Caribbean, of course, you have our CARICOM nations, and we only have one female prime minister. So it also speaks that even in the Caribbean region, I mean, those are issues that we need to address. But I'm very clear in my mind that we should not use this norm that says strong equates masculinity and weak equates, women and femininity.
Understood.
Frederick, if I may pick up
Effective
on
leadership.
that, if I may pick up on that, because when you said strong, that Penny really then said what I wanted to say, because you made the comment after I'd spoken. And I wish to add to what Penny said, and it is the whole question of how does one define strength? The answer tends to be one of brutish. The brutality and strength are equal. But if you look at results-based leadership, that is really what the test is. And we're seeing it now with COVID, that very difficult decisions had to be taken. How you manage your budget with limited incomes coming in, with limited revenues. How do you allocate resources? What are the hard decisions that need to be taken? And when women have made those decisions, they have had exceptional results that are measurable in the context of their societies and in the context of COVID results or the absence of spread and the safety of the population. So if you look at strength as results-based leadership, then women clearly are very strong. But we must not believe that because a woman is female and naturally, that because a person is female, that if they exercise a level of empathy, that means they cannot be strong, that somehow means that they are weak. That we have to disabuse people of that kind of perception and view. That's just the intervention that I wanted to make.
Very good one. Effective and results equates to strength.
Yeah. I just wanted to come in here because I also think that accepting that also means that the way we value certain, for example, government portfolios may need to change. For example, the view that social affairs or gender affairs are the weaker or unimportant. To me, they're among the most important. I've been arguing for a long time that the solution to, for example, our crime issue is a social one and not a national security or police one necessarily. But that requires a different sort of thinking. Yet the Minister of National Security is assumed to be a more important ministry than the Ministry of Social Affairs, which deals with fairness, justice, social support, things like that. So I think along with that, we also have to rethink what is important.
I agree. Hugh, I know you're itching.
Well, that's a significant point, and we're going to have to come back to it. But I'd like to get really very individual in this one. I mean, so we'll ask again everyone to comment on it, starting with you, Excellencies, and then I'm going to ask Professor Frederick as well. So people need role models. Everybody wants to see themselves in the picture. So if there are young people, and particularly young women, watching the road ahead, how do they follow your paths? For instance, what was the defining moment in your lives? You're all high achievers. You've got distinguished careers. Something at some point in your life made you think, you know what, of all the things that I could do, I am going to take on a leadership role. What is it that made you think, and you can therefore transmit to people watching, that they too can be leaders, particularly young women? Starting with Ambassador Penny Beckles.
Well, for me, it's all about your socialization. I guess for me, I've always been encouraged to lead. So that for me, it comes natural. I have always felt confident that there is absolutely nothing wrong in wanting to lead. And leadership is not necessarily politics, because people tend to feel that whenever you discuss leadership, you discuss politics. Leadership is at all levels, whether it's in your community. So, I grew up basically where at my home, from very young, I taught many young persons in the area in which I live. Then through the government, the People's National Movement government, there was always community activity, West Village, encouraging women to get involved, develop your skills. And once you have an opportunity, the opportunity exists to develop your skills, to be among others, to share experiences, the likelihood is that you're going to be comfortable leading. And from time to time, when I'm asked to give lectures to students, especially girls, and you ask them, would you like to be a leader? Would you like to be in charge? Very often the answer is no. And that is because in the socialization process, you really this issue of nurturing, of providing for the home and for the family and for the community, and in a sense, sacrificing a lot. And even COVID is saying that to us, that the women are the one who you must ensure that you're home, that you have to think about what everyone has something to eat. Very often you have to sacrifice, in some instances, remaining at home to ensure that the family is looked after. And when a decision is taken in most instances, shall I go to work or shall I remain and look after the family? The decision is taken to remain and look after the family. I would say to young girls that it's also about striking a balance, because I'm sure my two colleagues would say to you that we have all had to sacrifice, but you have to multitask, and you have to make a lot of sacrifices, but be comfortable with leading, be comfortable with wanting to share your God-given talent, your skills, um, and don't worry about those who would say that leadership or being a captain or being in charge, that's not the purview of women.
Same question for you, Professor Reddock. I mean, you make leaders, don't you? I mean, you're a university professor. I mean, how do you do that?
Well, in a way, I think Well, first of all, I have to be honest here and say that I don't think I ever aspired to leadership. I think leadership was often thrust on me, and then eventually I accepted it. But I don't. I think what my mother did and what I developed very early was a sense of fairness and social justice. And my mother also brought me up to be very aware, read a lot, be informed. And therefore, people said when I was a child, and they say I still am, I talk too much because I feel I know everything. And, and that, and that's because I was always reading and things like that. So I think my trajectory was a little different. But because of this, people would then think this person should be the leader. So I often tell people sometimes the true leader sometimes is recognized by others. You know, if you do your best, work hard, and develop, as my colleague said, the talents and the capabilities and possibilities that are available to you, then others see that leadership in you. And then that's how you sometimes get assigned positions of leadership. So I think we all have different trajectories. And many times you end up where you didn't plan to. But I think it's from doing your best. And that's what I tell my students. I tell my students that your education is not for your own good. And especially in the Caribbean, most of us, our education was paid by taxpayers, so that you have a responsibility to do something with this education that you were so fortunate to receive. And therefore, I think that doing your best, being informed and reading and knowing what's happening, to me, that's very important with leadership.
Ambassador Thompson, you, like your colleagues, are a role model. You are a mentor. Did you have a role model and a mentor? What brought you here? What would you say to young women who aspire to be Liz Thompson?
Well, I hope they aspire to be themselves, the best version of themselves, and not a Liz Thompson lookalike, because that is the first thing, recognizing that you are unique and special, using your gifts in a particular way, and that is important for each of us to recognize and be comfortable with who we are and with our individuality. You know, I agree with the things that my sister colleagues have said, but I want to share with you an experience that I had that I think shaped me. And it's critical, I think, for the perspective that young women have. I was probably between 7 and 9. Hugh, you would remember, I think it was the first time that the 747 aircraft came to Barbados. And of course, those days, the security was much different at the airports was much different to now. And people were allowed onto the tarmac, and there were jersey barriers, and there were policemen holding their arms out. But you could get relatively close to the aircraft, and people were pushing because it was the first jumbo jet having done a transatlantic flight, and they were very excited. And I was a small little thing. I never saw myself fat. I don't know what happened over the years, but I was a tiny little thing. I was there. And somehow, with all the pushing, I found myself pushed out of the crowd, beyond the barriers of the policemen, standing on the tarmac all by myself. And I looked back at my parents, and my father looked at me in horror. And he said, "Liz, come back, come back." And I looked at my mother, and the instant our eyes made four, as we would say in Barbados, my mother knew that I wanted to get on that aircraft. And my mother said three words to me that have shaped my life. She said, "Run, Liz, run." And I took off like a little bat out of I don't know where, a mini bolt, and took off to that aircraft. And I got onto the plane. I mean, I was a little girl, nobody stopped me. I got onto the plane, and I walked about, and I touched all the seats. I was in awe at this jumbo jet. And I thought, one day I am going to fly around the world in a plane just like this. Um, of course, that was the thinking of a 7-year-old. But what my mother told me in that moment is that it is okay to be out there by yourself, doing something completely different, as long as you are pursuing your dream and as long as you are being you. That is the freedom that my mother gave me at 7 or 8 years old. And it was therefore a lesson that I embraced and kept replicating throughout my life. And I think that a lot of women are afraid. Something is holding them back. Nobody has ever said to them, run, woman, run, so that they feel empowered to just take off and pursue it. And you know, another lesson that was critical for me was given to me by my former head teacher, who just died. She was buried a month ago, Dame Patricia Simmons. When I was 16, you know, we quarrel with young people when they have failures. When I was 16, I failed my O levels. I now have 4 academic degrees, including 2 masters. And I'm saying that for all the young women who are hearing and feeling disappointed with themselves or something in their lives and thinking that that means it's the end for them. It's not. And she said to me, Elizabeth, you have fallen down at the crossroads. You can either pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and continue on your journey, or you can stay right where you are and let all the traffic run over you. And those were the 2 lessons I learned. In that one, it was there is going to be failure. You can either stay where you are or you can get up and keep fighting. And I think it is important for us to tell women, run. You're going to fail, but keep running. And when you get to the table, accept that you deserve your place there. Sit at it and do your best.
Powerful, powerful.
Can I just come in here for a minute?
Yes.
Yeah, I wanted to say, you know, it's always, you know, in the Caribbean, for us, probably the best way to get a message across, as Liz just did, is to tell our story. When I was leaving to go to Barbados to study law, my father said to me that for him, the most important message he's going to give me is to be able to walk with kings and queens and always maintain the common touch. Now, I never quite understood what he was saying until I got a lot older. Because I reflected, I mean, you know, I'm saying, why is he telling me this? I'm going to do law. What really is the relevance of it? But it has really helped me because it keeps you grounded. I mean, we have all been, Professor Raddock and Excellency Thompson, in situations where, I mean, you come across just about anybody and everybody, especially at the UN. And your ability to be able to know when how you relate to people, whether it's a prime minister or whether it's the person you would meet on the street, can make an absolute difference for you in your lifetime in terms of your job opportunities, in terms of where you go. You know, and that's one of the, I mean, for me, that was one of my most important lessons that has stayed with me lifelong, and I would certainly share for young ladies.
Frederick.
I think that's really important because I remember it was Kathleen Drayton, who I know lived in Barbados for many years, who once said to me out of the blue, she said, Rhoda, you know, success in life is 20% qualifications and etc. and 80% the way you interact with people, your personal relationships, how you speak to people, etc. So I think that that was also a very important lesson that I got as well.
Well, these are truly amazing stories. Run, run, run. Yeah, and be able to meet with kings and queens and maintain the common touch. And these are beautiful stories.
And never be afraid to fail.
And never be afraid to fail. Yeah, yeah. Poetry, indeed. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about some specific areas, right? In terms of the impact of women in these areas. We talked about discussing issues such as health, education, environment, technology, and governance. We're not going to be able to dive deeply in any one of these topics in the time that we have allotted, but we certainly could touch them. So let's start with health, and we're in the midst of this pandemic, and it's looming, and it doesn't seem like it's going to be going anywhere for some time. And we've touched on it in much of the discussion already, but let's get into it a little bit more. We find that women being at the forefront, and I had mentioned that we would get into this in the fight against COVID-19 has amounted to a great degree of success in many countries. What is the element? What's the main ingredient for that? Let's talk about women in leadership positions, such as the head of CARFA here in the region is Dr. Joyce and John. She's the executive director. Ambassador Beckles there in Trinidad. You have a number of women in leadership positions in the medical field. The medical director at Cara Hospital, Dr. Michelle Trotman, and folks over in Tobago at the THA. Dr. Agatha Carrington, who's the Secretary of Health, and on, right? And then of course many of the countries that Ambassador Thompson mentioned that are led by women that have had these successes. What do women bring to the search? And we've talked about what women bring in different capacities, but in terms of health and this pandemic, what do women bring to the search for solutions during this pandemic that is so essential and quite frankly critical to bring us through this situation? Let's start with you, Ambassador Thompson.
Well, I think that a lot of women work in the health sector. Um, as nurses primarily, now as medical doctors. Many are working in the labs behind the scenes because when we think about the COVID pandemic, we don't think about the people in the labs. Equally, the people who are cleaners of all these specialist facilities that have been set up all over the Caribbean, they're primarily women. But I think that, perhaps what we could look at as well is not so much what women bring, but how women are going to be adversely impacted because whether it is all those women who are teachers in the school system, whether it's all those women who work as estheticians and do nails and hair and have been home now for months and still have to take care of their families, whether it has to do with the fact that a lot of the women who have lost their jobs have gone into caregiving for the families, for those who are sick, etc. And that is largely unpaid, unrecognized, unrewarded work, which is not highly valued. And I think we are going to have to ask ourselves, and certainly I want to ask myself, not only how have women contributed in saving the society during COVID as the primary caregivers in the healthcare system, but what are the disproportionate impacts on women? For instance, all the women who work in the tourism sector, 2 out of every 3 jobs in tourism is a female employee. All of those women have been home, are going to continue to be home. We hear that tourism in the Caribbean is going to be significantly impacted. 25% of the population and tourism workers are probably going to be out of work. What does COVID mean going forward to our societies, to these women and to their children and families? And what are there going to be, we think that women had made some gains in terms of employment over the years. Are there now going to be reversals because of COVID? So I'd like to hear my sisters on those issues. I know I've redefined your question, but I think that it is very relevant for some of what the people who are going to be hearing this program are actually experiencing. So Absolutely. I'll hear my sisters and then perhaps I'll make a comment.
No, actually what you did was you anticipated the follow-up. So you didn't really redefine it. So we are actually in the same mindset. Let's go to Professor Reddock and follow up a bit on that. I mean, again, the question of the role women play in bringing us out of this situation, or at least helping us to manage through the situation. And then, of course, as Ambassador Thompson talked about, the fact that, a large percentage of healthcare workers are women, and what does that do to the entire scheme? Professor Retta.
Yes, I agree with Ambassador Thompson really well, because I think that women are involved in so many different aspects. For example, the head of our teachers union, for the first time, I believe, in its existence, is a woman, and she has been leading on debates related to education and schooling, etc. Sometimes, in ways that sometimes open to a lot of controversy. But I think that seeing women's leadership means we have to see the breadth of all the ways in which women are leading throughout this process. But I really support Ambassador Thompson's discussion about the impact on women, because I think that COVID-19 is important because it has revealed a lot of the weaknesses and inequalities in society. I think our societies were going through some very difficult macroeconomic situations. For example, what I believe is a overwhelming dependence on the tourism sector in the entire region. And as a result, the decline of manufacturing, of agriculture, and many other areas of economic self-sufficiency, because of the global economic paradigm that has been dominant. And I think that in our region, we have not had adequate critique of this paradigm that has resulted in inequality, not only here, but in many other parts of the world. So we were already facing a situation of inequality. We were already facing a situation of the poor getting poorer and a minority of the rich becoming wealthier. And many of our mothers, many of our women working in the tourism sector, working in all the other low income sectors, without social protection and without social support systems. And I think this is what COVID really exposed. Within a matter of weeks, there were so many people facing hunger, being threatened to be thrown out of their homes. Small businesses were closing. It was clear that that the economy, the whole society was, and I think rapidly COVID exposed that. So for me, what we as a region and all of our governments need to really reflect, and I think some of that has already begun. I think already we are seeing the recognition that we can no longer depend only on international trade for our own survival, that we have to become more self-sufficient in the region. And I think it is up to women leaders to really bring this to the fore, because the insecurities that women are experiencing are also the insecurities that their children and family members are experiencing. So I think that this is a good time for reflection and a good time for charting a new way forward. The new road, as this program is
Road ahead, right?
so that's part of my contribution. Yes.
Indeed. Well, it's an excellent contribution. I think COVID uncovered quite a bit, and it taught us to think in ways that we weren't necessarily thinking. And to that extent, I suppose some thanks is due to the situation we're in. Let's go to Ambassador Beckles. I'll just add to what the question posed. Because the large percentage of healthcare workers are women, there's a question of how can they be supported by government, childcare and domestic support.
Oh, yes, yes.
Yeah, there's a question of
that's a big issue. Yeah.
Yeah, if that's the case, they need to be supported, right? So in your response, if you could address that as well, that would be fantastic. Ambassador.
I just want to join my colleagues, of course, in acknowledging the work of Dr. Joyce St. John, Executive Director, Head of CAFA, as well as Dr. Michelle Trotman, who is the Thoracic Medical Director of the Cora Hospital, who have really been doing tremendous work. But your question really speaks to addressing this role that women play for me in two aspects, because you're looking at the issue of the healthcare and you're also looking mainly at the issue of the society and at home. Whereas you have, as we said, in some instances, more than 70% of the nursing fraternity being dominated by women. You also, on the other side, those who are remaining at home and those who are making choices to ensure that their families are safe, secure, and looked after are really the women. And therefore, the question that you have asked is not only as it relates to the nurses, but also as it relates to those who are remaining at home. I mean, in terms of Trinidad and Tobago, I mean, the government has um, implemented a number of policies dealing with issues of grants, issues of those who are renting, because you have the loss of income. So there are multiplicity of policies. They have put in place a multiplicity of measures for these really challenging we look at the other situations of those with mental health, those with disabilities. I mean, those are all special cases that we have to treat with. I mean, and one, the very complex situation of domestic violence, because you do have
Oh,
men who
yes.
are at home who, in a sense, have virtually nowhere to go because COVID has put us in a situation where, in terms of making choices, I mean, your choices are really very limited. So the truth is that, I mean, the extent to which our nurses have been committed, have been loyal, have made a tremendous sacrifice, not just for their families, but generally for the entire countries. I mean, they really, really must be commended. And those of us who have not understood the value of the nursing profession, COVID has brought it directly home to us because they're in the front line. They are the ones who, to a large extent, are what you call the first responders. And I think all of us would want to certainly collaboratively acknowledge the work that they have done, really congratulate, support them. And it is a profession, I think, after COVID that people will definitely think of nurses, um, much more differently and really celebrate and acknowledge the tremendous contribution they have made, not just to the Caribbean, to the region. Those of us know that even in Britain and in the United States, there are so many nurses from the Caribbean who are doing human service for other countries in many parts of the world. And it's a credit to the nursing fraternity and the type of education that we have and the type of curriculum for the nurses in the Caribbean that have made them some of the best nurses in the world.
Indeed, indeed. In fact,
Yeah.
Professor Reddick, well, Ambassador, I know Professor Reddick, you wanted to jump in, and it does seem that Ambassador Thompson wants to jump in as well. So why don't we do this? Let's go to Ambassador Thompson first, and then we'll come back to Professor Reddick.
Thank you very much, Frederick. The point that I wanted to make is this. You asked what can governments do? And I think that there is a critical question that regrettably I'm not hearing a lot in policy discussion, and it is, what is the post-COVID world going to look like?
Mm-hmm.
And how do we engineer our societies for success in a post-COVID world? Because there is no doubt that COVID has redefined the way we live, the way we interact, the economy, society, recreation, everything. But there's a further point that I want to make. I think that in equipping Caribbean society and women in particular, that we have to look at STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, how we treat the STEM in relation to our girls. Because science, these areas are not seen as female type careers or areas. And yet they are becoming, in knowledge driven economies, far more relevant. We saw the rise of technology in a way that we had not even, I mean, it was ubiquitous before. But now, if you look at how Zoom is being used to have parties, for meetings, to do business, the way everything has suddenly gone online in the way that it hadn't before, it is important to equip our girls for technology, for science, for mathematics, for engineering, to be imaginative, to be creative, to be innovative in these spheres of activity, which are going to be some of the careers and openings and niches of the future. And when robotics and AI take off even further, unless our girls can work and compete, and our societies, our Caribbean societies, can compete globally in these fields, then we are going to be marginalized. And it is therefore critical, as we engineer post-COVID society and find space for our girls and our young women, that we start to push them in these directions. How do we get more women into entrepreneurship? How do we get them into these particular fields that are even assuming greater and greater importance in terms of the technology and so on? So that is the point that I wanted to make, that this is going to be critical for girls if we are to ensure that they're not socially and economically marginalized in the careers of the, well, I can't even say of the future, because they're already emerging. I mean, look at how Zoom has
Mhm.
taken off, both as what do you call that, a stock, and its whole value, the way it now adds value to society and economy, etc. So I want to pause here because I want to hear Sister Rhoda.
Indeed, 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 indeed. Professor Reda.
Okay. Yeah, well, first of all, I wanted to add to the list Dr. Carissa Etienne, who's the head of PAHO, because I think that's also a very important Caribbean woman that is in a leadership position at this very critical time. But I also wanted to relate to the nurses, and based on the value that we have, well, they were always valuable, but COVID has reminded us, I think we have to ask, what can we do to empower nurses post-COVID? In other words, we hear a lot about the doctors, but are we hearing nurses being invited to speak about their experience? Are they seen as experts in the field? What are there? Is the status of nurses going to improve? Will we value people who decide to be nurses? Will we give them increased income commensurate with the importance of those positions? So I'm seeing that many professions that are female dominated, simply by being female dominated, they decline in value and status. So we have to see how we can revalue this occupation and put it in its correct place within the, uh, the body of health professions. The next thing I wanted to speak about was the science, because if I'm not, if I'm not wrong, I stand to be corrected, but females are the majority of science graduates, I think, throughout the University of the West Indies. In the Faculty of Engineering on our campus, they're close to 50%, and they are often the ones who perform better. And I know that they are also very much represented in others. I think that what is important is what happens to them after they graduate. Are they given the opportunities to
Mhm.
those positions and to succeed in those positions? Because girls are definitely doing science. In fact, I think that sometimes we have an overbalance, because the arts and the humanities right now are really suffering because of the low value that's being placed in those areas. So I think that even as we value the science, we have to also value the arts, the literature, which were also male dominated fields for many years as well. So I think that we have to have that balance, but we have to ensure that the women who are trained in science and technology do have the opportunities when they graduate to get the positions that would allow them to flourish. I think what I've also seen, which is different, is that in many parts of the world, but not the Caribbean, where we tend to be over specialized, students can do a broader range of subjects. For example, I saw an interview with a young woman, family from Trinidad and Tobago, who was involved in developing one of the COVID-19 vaccines. And her first degree was in sociology and I think biochemistry or something like that. But in our situation, it's almost impossible because from very young, we begin to divide the class, the science, the business, the literature or whatever, and we do not allow that cross-fertilization of the mind that is so important for brilliance and creativity. So I do think we need to look at our education system, not only in terms of numbers, because I think we do it quite well on that, but in terms of the quality. And is it really serving us in the best way and allowing us to develop to our fullest creative potential? So I just wanted to bring that to the table.
I just wanted to just quickly jump in here. But you know, COVID has also reminded us about the importance of the digital platform and the digital technology, and to ensure that girls are not left behind. Because COVID is saying to us, basically, those of us who don't have computers, those who are not computer literate, those who can't purchase online, those who are into business and don't understand digital technology, the likelihood is that you're going to find yourself left behind. So therefore, the issue of ensuring that as we revisit education, as we revisit the whole issue of teaching, it has become absolutely necessary for our curriculum, for both our teachers and our students to have an absolute and total understanding of the importance of the world of computers and the world of technology. Um, you know, we know now that for our students to be taught, you just have to have access to computers, you have to understand digital technology, you have to be able to do your classes online, the teachers have to be able to teach online. So it really requires us to do an entire revisit of our education system, our approach to on recognizing the importance of no one being left behind.
Well, I will say that, Hugh, you wouldn't want a better segue into the next line of questioning that Ambassador Beckles just gave you. It was brilliant, the whole issue of education. But before you begin, Hugh, I want to acknowledge the folks that are online and commenting very favorably on this discussion. Our audience is a great one, very engaging. We have Empress Bongani who says hello to these amazing Caribbean women. We have Cleo or Seal Carib saying, as we say, big up to the ladies and Tempo. We have Heather Ryan James, excellent points. And a number of other folks that are here. Be bold, insightful lessons, amazing stories, ladies. Women are carrying an unequal burden due to COVID-19. Yeah, the comments are coming, and you cannot run from their abusers, as the point that you made in terms of domestic violence during this period of time. Excellent point, Ambassador Thompson. If girls are left out, Caribbean societies will falter, and it goes on and on. So thank you for joining us, those that have joined us and commented. We appreciate you, and we're glad that you're enjoying this conversation as much as we are in bringing it to you. Hugh, that amazing segue into education.
Thank you, Frederick. Well, in actual fact, I mean, I know we're getting close to the end of the show now, but our panelists have effectively answered the following two questions that I had.
I apologize.
That's female excellence, you know that.
That's it. You're always 10 steps ahead.
It's called perception, perceptiveness, you know, anticipation.
That's right. Can I say, Hugh, that you and I are only just trying to keep up, correct?
This is what leadership is about. I mean, you know, anticipating where the rest of us will be, and you know, and taking us there. But in all seriousness, I mean, we covered. I know that Ambassador Beckles is particularly passionate about something that both of your colleagues mentioned, and that is the whole business of women in STEM subjects: science, technology, engineering, and technology. Science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Excuse me. And we've all acknowledged that the world as we know it now, today, is changing. So the post-COVID world is going to look substantially different eventually than it looks today. The question is this: Ambassador, well, I'm going to ask Ambassador Thompson to tackle this one for me. Has our education system in the Caribbean, does it work for or against female leaders? The point that I'm trying to get at is it that women have been avoiding the STEM areas and avoiding subjects that we're discussing now, or are they being steered away? That's the issue. Is our education system, I mean, how do we fix this? Ambassador Thompson.
Well, if we are to be guided by Professor Raddock's comments just now, it doesn't need fixing in terms of numbers, but the question is, what is the fix in terms of opportunity and income? I think the question we would have to ask, all of these women who are trained in science and technology areas and in the STEM fields, what are they doing? Are they getting the top flight jobs? Are they getting the income commensurate with their level of training? Or is it that they are going to finding themselves having to teach primary school, for instance, or having to work selling fabric in the store because they cannot, the society is not absorbing them, and because when they turn up for jobs that science students, science specialists are required for, the inclination is to employ the male applicant rather than the female applicant, because you think that the man is more naturally inclined. I was actually involved and am involved with WIRE, Women in Renewable Energy, because one of my masters is in oil and gas law. And I worked with a lot of female engineers, and they tell you about female energy engineers, and they tell you about the tremendous difficulty they have getting hired, being treated as equals, for their male colleagues to take them seriously when they're in the classroom setting and in the work setting initially, and the number of women who give up because they are treated that they're not treated as equals in the work setting. So it comes down to, I think, what happens post-training. If the numbers are showing that the women are being trained, why are we still not seeing them? For instance, I know that, in fact, it was Penny who introduced me to her. There is a Trinidadian young woman, I think she is, who is an astronaut with NASA. There is a Barbadian scientist at McGill University who discovered a gene which predisposes women to breast cancer, and she named it the KISO gene. Her name is Professor Juliette Daniel. So there are women in science, but we don't hear of them. We're not using them as role models. We don't know that they're there. We don't know what they're doing, and we really have no idea how high quality and pioneering their work is. So the two things would be, what do we do with the women once they qualify? Is there really opportunity for them? And how are we creating role models and inspiring women to get them into these fields, get them recognized, get them paid, and get them paid appropriately? So I'm going to pause here so that the others can comment.
Well, hang on a second. I have a follow-up question. By the way, I am going to insert another name of a role model technology area. I believe that Maxine Williams is originally from Trinidad, who is the head of global diversity, I think, at Facebook. So, amazing.
Hugh, be sure to keep up your voice.
Yes,
I'm actually not hearing. Yes.
Sure. Okay. Okay. So my point was about Williams as a role model, who is head of global diversity, I believe, from Facebook. I think she's I'm going to check the technology and see what's going on with my own microphone. Are you hearing me clearly now?
It's a struggle.
It's a struggle. And I am projecting. We'll try and fix that. So the point that I wanted to get back to though, was the point that we were making about opportunity. So it seems like we've shifted the balance a little bit in the right direction, and women are more educated in the Caribbean in the STEM subjects, but the opportunities might not be there. and the certainly the pay equality might not be there and so on. Are women, though, in the Caribbean willing to pack their bags and go somewhere else and find the opportunity, because our communities are small, our resource pool is small, it gets saturated very quickly? Are women willing to do what you have done? Strap your bags on and head to where the opportunity is.
Run.
Outside.
But I think that's a big brain drain that has really affected our region. Because as I said before, our region invests a lot in education, and then we lose many of the brightest and the best. And then we revel in these stories of our brilliant women who have achieved this and achieved that, but we wish they had achieved them here. And I think
the opportunities aren't there.
yeah, I think there are a few things. I think one of them is that many of our science sectors need to be developed. You know, the whole R&D, because a lot of this research, etc., you know, the research, the technology, these are aspects of our economy that need to be developed. And I think because our economy had become colony importation, we had not been able to develop these industries locally that could really absorb these young people. Now, it's difficult for us to do it as single countries. And this, of course, is where CARICOM, looking at our region as a whole, could organize these regional bodies. I know it's not easy, but I really think we have to put our minds to them because we are losing many excellent young people. They are packing their bags and they are leaving. And I'm telling you, I spent so much of my time trying to encourage people to stay, tell them, you know, you have to make the difference, you have to stay, but it's not easy. So I think in terms of, we speak of STEM graduates, but we need to develop the STEM industries, the STEM capacity, areas for absorption. I think also there's also a masculine culture in many of these technological and engineering areas. So for example, it took many years for women who graduated from the University of the West Indies to get employed in engineering jobs. Some of them remained unemployed for quite a while. And even those who are employed now will tell you that they have to have higher grades than the males to be hired for better position, for the same position. And the things that we always hear is that they can't go on the shop floor, that if they can't give orders to workmen on the job, or there are a lot of these kinds of masculinist assumptions that shape employment patterns. So that many of the young women who do science, you're quite right, they end up teaching, or they then struggle to get into medicine or to get into some other postgraduate area, because even though they have that science or technology degree, they are not always welcome in many of these areas. Now, this is changing. I have to say that as we speak, this is changing, but maybe that could be another discussion.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, for me, this is such a very, very important topic. And I mean, I must say that it also speaks to the role of the University of the West Indies in this area of the digital technology, in this area of STEM, you know, and in this area of equal opportunities for women who want to be involved in science and technology. We think our own culture in Trinidad and Tobago. I mean, years ago, you would not have had as much women involved in the arrangement of steel bands. So you have seen, as Professor Raddock said, changes, but I mean, you do want the opportunities to be there. You do want a level of comfort that I can arrange as good as and be given an equal opportunity to do it. And it also, for us, the importance of sports and science, because we have seen our female athletes do exceptionally well. And in most instances, you have to leave to go elsewhere. I mean, we are really fascinated by the fact that they have been going to Jamaica and doing research as to why it is they have been producing such excellent athletes. So we do know that in a lot of instances, whether it's in our cricket, whether it's in our football, whether it's in our music, that we have a rich culture and a lot of raw talent. And the extent to which we have developed that over the years is something that we have to reflect on and discuss. So that, yes, the person that they spoke about is Camille Allen, who's a rocket scientist. She designs rockets. And she's from Trinidad and Tobago, but she left, but she always had a dream as a child. That's what she wanted to do. So she's at NASA, really making us proud, and she has her own foundation, and really trying to encourage other young girls who want to get involved in STEM. So the truth is that, I mean, we have to do our own reflection, our own introspection, and we have to look at the business community who want to invest in research, because we do know that in many parts of the world where you have seen success in research, it's not always the governments. It's people who have a love for research and business and who have done well themselves, and who invest in their respective countries and who invest in the university as areas of teaching and as areas of science and development. And I think that's one of the things that we also have to do in the
Yes,
Caribbean.
yes,
Look at twinning as well with other universities and other organizations, as an opportunity for us as well to do better.
yes.
All excellent points. Hugh, you have a follow up, or shall we?
No, I've reached the end. I don't have.
Okay.
Yes. Go ahead.
Well, we
I
I'm
just want,
watching. Sure,
sorry,
go
I
ahead,
just
Professor Reddock.
wanted to support what my colleague said about, indigenous technologies where we have an advantage. For example, steel band technology. I
Mhm.
think that that is one area, and I think there are many areas in which the university is doing research, but somehow there's a disconnect with the rest of our society or even with our stakeholders regionally and internationally. So I think that, for example, the research on steel band technology is something that's very innovative that we should be the experts in this area. And we should be the ones that people come to for knowledge, for training, for the actual instruments and all the technological developments in that area. So I think that as we move and develop, we have to look at the areas that we really can bring something to the world. And as Ambassador Beckel said, that there are women involved in this at various levels. And we really need to get to understand and see how these things could be developed.
All excellent points, and it does tell us that there's a lot of work to be done, but we're all up to the task in this, and it's so important that we do that work. I point to one of our viewers indicated another great Caribbean person doing well out there, a Jamaican who is a U.S. I did see this article, U.S. Air Force pilot, first senior woman in the U.S. Air Force. So we are there, and to Professor Reddock's point, we do have to watch the brain drain in the Caribbean that has been going on for decades. That talent and perhaps COVID will be one of those things that assist us in that. But it is important that we watch that brain drain as well. Try to keep the talent here as well, or at least encourage them to come back.
Yes.
Yeah, and then when they come back, we need to be prepared, Ambassador Beckles, to have opportunities for them, because
Yes.
Okay.
that's the main issue.
So,
So
are we
we I'm sure, Ambassador Thompson, come on. Yes.
Sorry, I wasn't too sure how close we were to the end, but I really just wanted to make a comment about that. I agree with the broad point about the brain drain. However, I think that Caribbean communities has been very bad at maximizing our resource that is the diaspora.
Yes.
We have people all over the globe with amazing skills, talents, financial resources, networks, knowledge, placed in amazing jobs where they're in contact with people who can make a difference in the Caribbean. And we don't leverage that as
Yes.
a resource. And in fact, if we educate all these young people and they go overseas, if we were leveraging where they are and who they are and what they do and what they can bring to the table, and think in terms of building a diasporic economy regionally, then we could really do extremely well. And so we can talk about the brain drain, but we have limited physical space. And we have to really start thinking now about how we use the technology and cyberspace to expand our economic space, and how then we leverage our diaspora who are overseas but who are connected by heart and passion
Yes.
and
Yes.
culture to their region and to who they are, and how we use that to help to build the region going forward, particularly in this COVID and post-COVID era.
Yeah,
Very
an
true.
excellent, an
Yeah.
excellent point. An excellent point.
Excellent point. Yeah.
Yeah, most of us, including myself, studied abroad and wished that there was an outreach to us somewhere along the way
Yes.
while we were in college, when we started up
Yeah.
careers. Yeah, and particularly as you say, because the Caribbean remains in our heart, and just a bit of outreach would have allowed us to do even more. And so we do take that point, especially also in the tourism industry. I mean, uh, reaching out to our folks and to become ambassadors, and to really actually return to our shores during this period of time when it might be difficult to get the general market to come. Hugh and I often talk about the need to target and to create marketing that is targeted to that particular segment of our community. So it is an excellent point that we agree with.
Yeah.
We're going to round out our discussion, which is a beautiful one, man. It's bringing joy to my heart. It's a beautiful discussion, beautiful, and thankfully it's not just my heart; it's the people who listening to. So we got maybe just two more topics. I think we'll round out with this governance, and then the final topic of sort of that gender inequality and how we address that square, head on. In the next 15 minutes or so that we have. Let's go to you, Ambassador Beckles, because with regards to governance, we've already talked about it. To some extent, really solidified the case that women need to be in leadership positions for a number of reasons. We talked about COVID and the fact that, I mean, even the statistics that countries with women leadership have suffered 6 times fewer confirmed deaths from COVID-19 than countries with governments led by men. We got the statistics. It is essential that women sit in these seats. You are currently yourself on the eve of facing the electorate of Trinidad in a very important general election that is scheduled for Monday, August 10th, I believe. And 2 questions. What impact do women have generally on the outcome of elections? Do they come out to vote? Do women vote for women? How does that happen? And the second part of that question is, once you become a legislator, and we certainly wish you the best. What are your thoughts and goals for improving the lives of women in Trinidad and Tobago once you sit in that seat?
One of the good things about this discussion is Rhoda and Liz are really smiling. So, I'm waiting for him. It's like, let's hear what she's going to say. But, one of the concerns for me, of course, is the issue of data collection and data analysis, and whether or not our various elections organizations can actually present the data in terms of gender. I mean, as it stands now, that's a work in progress, so that it's not easy for me to say, well, yes, women come out, or yes, you have a certain percentage. I mean, we do know the percentage, in terms of women and men, but, in terms of the elections and boundaries, saying in every constituency, you have X amount of women, X amount of men. We have not reached to the stage of having this aggregation. And for me, that's really very important, because it speaks to a number of things. At times, your inability to do that scientific assessment in terms of how many women actually vote, how many have voted, So that's something we have to ask for in the region. I mean, I don't know about other regions, but we have not yet
Mm-hmm.
reached to the stage where we have that that analysis. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I can only speak as a candidate. I mean, going out into the field that, I mean, over the years, I've contested many elections, and I can say that in a sense, the majority of persons that canvass for you are women. In the political party that I belong to, there is a women's arm, which is, very important, because that means that that women's arm can directly, of course, influence the political process. So you do know you have that tremendous support. Um, as I speak, we have more than 30% of the candidates are women. I mean, there are 41 candidates for the political parties. So I mean, your one-third threshold is there. And the president of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, for the first time, there's a female. Our president of the Senate, our speaker of the House, our leader of government business, I mean, all women. And we do have a number of women sitting in the cabinet in Trinidad and Tobago. So, I mean, I can comfortably say, I mean, I have held different portfolios, similar to my sister Liz, who has also been Minister of the Environment, Public Utilities. I mean, that's basically a ministry that has been male dominated, so that the political party that I belong to has given women the opportunity really to serve at all levels. I mean, I have myself been the leader of opposition business in the Senate. So that in terms of, when we all talk about increasing the participation of women in politics, at local government, it's always a great entry point. I have myself been a local government councillor, and it's always a great way to introduce yourself into the political arena. So, but I talk again as I go back to Barbados being the only country with a female prime minister in the CARICOM region. So we talk about gender sensitization in terms of the political arena. We talk about gender issues and policies being in part of the decision-making process, because I always say that increased participation of women in politics does not necessarily translate into what we call gender issues getting onto the forefront, or gender issues directly being part of your decision-making process. So we always have to be conscious of that issue. And I also say about the importance of recognizing that there are many gender-sensitive men in the Caribbean, because we often tend to forget the importance of lobbying the men who are sensitive to the issues of women, and recognizing those who, of course, when they're in leadership roles, ensure that women are celebrated. And so that's why I mentioned the fact that, I mean, the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago right now would have given those several opportunities, and having the first woman elected, and of course having appointed those many women to the positions that I spoke about, of course, including myself as the ambassador to the United States.
Indeed, indeed, indeed. Well, so much you just unpacked, and so much that we could dive into. Mindful of the time, thank you, and we certainly here at the network, and I think everyone on this panel wish you the best come August 10th. We believe that you will be a beacon of hope for so many. So we do wish you the best.
I didn't deal with the issue of influence of what I will do for in terms of women.
That's
but
true.
I know the timing, but I mean I'm sure that
Please.
I mean I'm willing to come back another day, and certainly talk about that. Ensure that my other colleagues have the opportunity.
Well, I think they would yield a couple minutes for you to okay. so yes.
Well, I mean, I'm going back to the issue of what I spoke about, data collection. I mean, I really do want to influence that, because I think it is really critical to take a science-based approach to look at data, to ensure that you have the information about women, how we vote, what are the issues that are important to us. Because I think ultimately it's critical as you make the decisions to be clear about our thoughts and our views in several different areas. I mean, for my vision for the constituency in which I am running, which is Arima, I'm really looking at Arima being a smart city. I'm going back again to the issue of technology, issue of how do you access services, and how being a smart city can make things different in terms of issues of safety, issues of the environment. I mean, we are into the hurricane season, so how do you think about women in the rural communities and the ease with which you can share information, the ease with which you can communicate, the ease with which women in the agricultural sector can use the digital technology to their benefit. For me, that is big, and that is going to be one of the main things that I will be advancing. I'm looking forward to, communicating with the organizations who are responsible for the whole issue of technology and making people's life easier. When you think of domestic violence and you think of remaining at home, and the fear, just the general fear about going out in the public. I mean, how do we allow our women not just to feel safer, but to be able to do the things that they have to do at home for their children, for themselves, for their communities. And that's really what smart cities are all about. So, I look forward to, having had the benefit of being at the United Nations. I've served as the president of UN Women. I'm now on the board of Gender Champions. So, I've had the experience in terms of having a better understanding of issues relating to women and how can I now use the experience over those years, that experience at the UN on the global stage, and certainly assist in terms of being part of a team of a government that can, make the lives of the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago better.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Well, we thank you again. And once again, we wish you the best on August 10th, indeed. Hugh, you want to take us out on that final point? What can we do to ensure that women sit in these seats? What can we do, Hugh?
Well, you give me the most unfair question. It's unfair because I'm going to ask our three panelists, starting with Professor Reddock, and then going to Ambassador Thompson, and ending with Ambassador Beckles. It's unfair because we're asking you in a minute to say what your hope is for the Caribbean. What does the road ahead look like for the Caribbean? We've all accepted it's going to be different now. It's not the same Caribbean as it was before COVID. It's going to be different. What is the road ahead for the Caribbean? In 60 seconds, starting now.
And you asked me first. Well, that's a big question. I am really hoping that we can learn the lessons of this period and that we can reflect, first of all, to set up structures that are more equal so that all groups and classes can benefit more equally in what the society has to offer. I think that we speak about women generally, but women are not all in the same position. And there are a lot of low-income women who in extremely difficult circumstances, and then their children end up also in difficult circumstances. So I think we really have to focus on the most vulnerable, and we need to get back to that. I think the region definitely has to restructure its economy and restructure its whole approach to inequality, and including gender inequality within the region.
Ambassador Thompson?
Given the time, I think that what we have to do is to ask ourselves, where will the opportunities be post-COVID? How do we build a society and economy, a Caribbean society and economy, individually and regionally, that is more just socially and economically? And how do we develop a model of Caribbean development that is sustainable, resilient in the face of crises, crises, whether they're natural crises like hurricanes or like COVID, and ensure that all our people have a space in this society where they can feel valued and respected. And part of the way that we need to do that is apply a gender lens to all
Yes.
policy. It is not enough to have a women's department or a gender department. We really do have to have policy that is viewed through a gender lens if we are to have full development of all our people and to build just, equitable societies that are resilient and that have space for all our people. And that is what I want for the Caribbean. And that is what I think we need to do.
Yeah, for me, it's greater recognition of the role of women, um, mainly because this COVID really gives us an opportunity to look at our countries individually, because COVID has, of course, restricted the movement of people. So at the same time, when you think about your country individually, you also recognize the importance of a collaboration, communication, and the role that technology can play in terms of us interacting at a level where we recognize that there are many similar issues that are important in the Caribbean. We think of what has happened with food security. I mean, importing virtually everything, and now you have a, the challenge is there for us, and we recognize that COVID has literally forced some of us to realize that in a sense, there can be some agricultural sustainability. And for me, the most important issue I would say at this point in time is food security. And you look at that even with a gender lens, because you realize many of the persons involved in agriculture are women.
Are women.
Indeed. Wow.
Frederick,
Well,
last word is yours. This has been an honor and a pleasure for me. It's been a masterclass, certainly for all of us who are associated with the road ahead, and certainly all of us who are parents and proud parents of girls. There's a lot that we learned from these leaders, global and regional and international leaders on this panel. So, Frederick, last word is yours.
absolutely. Well, I think this one goes down in history. Clearly, it's been a beautiful discussion, and I think that the gender lens is really and truly the only lens we must look through at this point. It is so important, and I think the case has been made as one of the most powerful cases that could be made anywhere, Privy Council or any place that gender lens is 100% needed. Thank you from the bottom of my heart and on behalf of the Temple family and our audience for being with us. Ambassador Penelope Beckles, thank you. Professor Rhoda Reddock, thank you. Of course, Ambassador Henrietta Thompson, thank you for being such great sport and for adding such a tremendous dialogue to the marketplace of ideas. I hope the only thing that I will ask is that you come back again. We certainly will be calling upon you on various topics as we chart the road ahead. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us. My name is Frederick Morton again. I am the CEO and founder of Tempo Networks. On behalf of my colleague, Mr. Hugh Riley, my co-host, we thank you for being here on the road ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.